Okay, so this is part two. I just covered back to what the background was as to where I was in my walk with God and in my church. The few years leading up to the time that I get to leave the Adventist church, and I had no plan on that at all. In fact, every time we would read or somebody would say something about Sister White, that would just tick me off, and I would shut down immediately. I love Sister White more than anybody that I know, and I think it's a big mistake when we do that. You don't understand. If you are at a different level and you're trying to talk to somebody about something that they hold very dear, you have to respect that. That shows you respect them as a person. And you're not trying to be right, you are trying to help them. If you talk down on the thing that I love, how do you expect me to follow you when it has not shown me any harm, hurt, or danger? I just think you're crazy, because you don't know what has gone on in my life and how those books have brought me to the place where God could find me. And we have to be respectful of that. We also have to be respectful that God allowed this Adventist church to be there. If he didn't want it, he could have destroyed it. He allowed it to happen. He allowed Sister White to write all those things. There's 15 million people in that denomination, and God knows each and every single one of them, and he has allowed them. So it would behoove us to be careful how we talk to those people, because they are us at a different state. Because if you mess them up, they're all God's children anyway. So anyway, we fast forward to the year, I think it was 2016. 2017. I am still trying to find how I am going to incorporate the right hand of the gospel into my work, into my ministry, because that's what I really wanted to get into. And at this time, I get my 50th birthday. I got to go for my colonoscopy, and when I come out of that room, out of the procedure, the doctor sits on my bed and she says, "Mrs. Matewe, I am so sorry to tell you, but you have colon cancer." And Chelsea was there, and I was still groggy from the anesthesia, and I looked at this woman, and my first thought was like, why are you going to say something like that in front of the child? She's going to be upset and all of that thing. I didn't want her to hear that, because I didn't want her to have to handle that. And then I felt sorry for the doctor that she had to tell me that. And at the same time, I thought that was very unconventional. Usually they will just tell you, we'll talk, we'll come to the office and come right away, and then sit you down and then talk to you. She's telling me in front of everybody. There's curtains outside and people everywhere. And yes, she is telling me. And I'm like, okay, what time did you send this? Did you send a biopsy to the lab? Did you get a pathology? You didn't. You just tell me right out in my face that this is colon cancer. How do you know? And anyway, it was devastating. It was devastating news, but that was the beginning of what shook me. So I go home, try to figure out how am I going to handle this. I couldn't tell my family the first day. When I did tell them, everybody kind of lost it. We had to gather each other together and just sit down and think about it for a minute. And then at this time, I decided, you know what? I'm not going to tell the people at the church. Let me hold on to this for a minute. I want to find out, maybe this is a chance that God wants to show me how to actually implement the health message in this whole disease of cancer. So we started reading up a little bit more on that, because I've been teaching people about this stuff. So I started reading up a lot more. You should try this and try that. And then I thought, okay, we discussed with my family, decided, we did all tests and everything. And they said, we want to remove this right away. They said, this is not genetic. They did test it. So I'm like, this is really strange. And I talked to the doctor. I'm like, look, I've been vegetarian for 23 years. And he's like, oh, I don't know. I don't know what happened. I guess it's just a weird thing. So at the same time, when this just happened, there was a guy that I knew from Wildwood, and he had just come back into town. And so he was kind of trying to get some work going. And I said, okay, come, let's go to the church. Let's pick up. And he'd been doing a great work. He's been helping people get over HIV and all kinds of stuff. And so I was like, oh, wow, this is good. So you come back. And we were in class together at Wildwood. So this was good. And we went through the whole process. And then he said, why don't you go to one of these places and then we eat this way, we change your diet. I still was vegetarian. I was not vegan though. And so now it tightened, and now I had to be vegan and organic. And I'm like, oh Lord, do you know how that thing is? Anyway, I went to Eden Valley. We decided with the family, like, okay, we're going to let you go ahead, try whatever you need to. But if you come back and it doesn't work, then you need to go for surgery. And that was what we agreed on. I talked to my doctors and they were in agreement. They said, okay, go. You're in the medical field. You know what you're talking about. If that's what you feel, go. So I went off to Eden Valley. I was there for the 2-week program. I came home. I explained to them what it was all about when I got there, and every one of them were like, "Just go for the surgery." Then I'm like, "No, I'm not going for the surgery because I have faith that God is going to heal me." And we're going to use the health message. Finally, I get a chance to prove it. How else am I going to prove it? Better than on me. And so we do all the treatments, we go through the whole rigmarole. I learn about it. I wanted to have my own lifestyle center at one time. And I'm like, this is actually very good because now I get to learn firsthand as a patient, not as a teacher, not as a therapist, but as a patient. And the first thing I tell you about the whole program that I did not like is that they reinforce in your head, and I don't think they even understand this, the idea that you are the patient. You always get called that. So it's going to become important later on in my life. And I didn't like it at that time. Not that I was in denial. I just didn't want to be identified with what cancer has. This is like a death sentence. And they were kept saying, oh, the people with cancer, you need to eat this. The people with cancer. So every time you went for meals, every time you went anywhere, you were called the cancer patient. It just felt terrible because I wasn't sick. I didn't have anything to on my face or my body that showed that I had this stuff, except an MRI and all the other testing. So that right there made me think that when it's my turn to help people, I'm not going to call anybody by a disease. They are people, And it helped me at that same point to realize what patients go through when the doctors give them a diagnosis. I had been very sympathetic, but there's a limit to where you are as a practitioner or as a doctor, and how you deliver your message. You cannot stay aware that this is a big deal, because some of the things it's not a big deal, and yet now I'm looking at it. I tell somebody you have diabetes and they totally lose it. I've been in the medical field enough to know I am expecting people to get frustrated and said, what does this mean? Am I going to die? And how can I get rid of this? So I know how to handle that for them in a compassionate way. But this changed me. It made me realize and takes different level that every time I give somebody bad news, it doesn't matter what kind of result it is. It could be a very, very minor thing. I have to understand that I'm talking to a live person who has got very, very serious feelings, and they need, and a lot of fear comes with that. So anyway, after I came from from Eden Valley, I went back and I had another MRI to check the progress, if it had done anything, and it had not. In fact, it had grown more. And the doctor said, we cannot wait anymore. We need to get you into surgery and get this taken over. So I said, okay, no problem. Went in, had the surgery, came out. Something happened when I was in the surgery, the day after, the day I was going to be discharged. I was fine. I was healthy before I went in. I had done a 7-day fast. And at this point, God had been working with me so much. I had been going through so many things emotionally. There was terror. There was fear. I was like, oh, Lord, I don't want to die right now, and then I realized, well, okay. This is just a colon cancer. They're going to take this out, and you have at least 6 months, if anything, then you can kind of get your act together, and pray. Maybe God can save you. But then came the chance that maybe God has already, my name has come up in probation, and probation door is closed for me. That was the worst. That was the beginning of the worst things that I felt. And I prayed and I prayed and I tried to have faith and I did everything that I could. I got the people, I didn't talk to, the people that I thought were like the wimpy Christians. I got the strong ones that were really good friends. And we prayed about this thing and they anointed me and did all kinds of stuff. And still this cancer was not miraculously removed. And they kept saying, well, maybe surgery is a miracle. Then I'm like, how? Don't give me that kind of an answer. If you got nothing to say, let's not make a cop out for God. And I think we do that so much in the church. Anyway, after the surgery, I'm grappling with the idea that I have strayed so far away from God. My faith is so weak, it could not save me. And I didn't know what to do. And I remember this day, I took my Bible. We were expecting people to come and visit us in the evening. And I took my Bible and a little stool and I went and sat outside and I said, let me read the book of Hebrews. Perchance I can find my faith and I can know why this thing didn't work out for me. And so I started reading Hebrews chapter 1. God is so good. God is so good. And as I was reading, I realized this is not about the faith. Hebrews is about the investigative judgment that is not there. It's telling us right out that Jesus is seated at the right hand of his Father and that we are there. There is going to never come a time, because he ever lives to make intercession for us. There's never going to come a time where I'm going to have to stand before an angry God without an intercessor. And I was like, wait a minute, what does that even mean? And the more I read it, my eyes got opened. Then I could see what Brenda had been telling me all this time. And at this point, my guest's alive. Now I want them to leave because I want to call her. And I call her and I'm like, Brenda, what were you trying to tell me? The book of Hebrews. And she says, oh my gosh, I thank God. You see it. And we were laughing and crying at the same time. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. There is no investigative judgment. My name is not coming up anyway. There is no 1844. And then she said, go and read Daniel. And I was afraid because I thought, I'm not going to understand the book of Daniel. I've never understood this stuff. And I went in. Now I have new eyes. I was so excited. At that point, that was the day. I still even remember the dress I was wearing. And I was like, oh, wow. This is the truth. There is no investigative judgment because we were supposed to stand before an angry God and show the world. We were the 144, and I know that the church has changed that, but this is what we were supposed to do, and none of that is going to happen. And then I went and then I read the Hebrews, then I started reading the book of Daniel, and I could see that there's a question, there's an answer, there's a question, there's an answer, and it explains and finishes itself right there. That blew my mind, because now I'm like, the Bible is very easy to read. We have to believe what God says. If he says he's going to do something, he's going to do it. We don't have to change it or twist it or add on to it or explain it away or make it seem as. And that's what we've always been known to do in Adventism. And this is why it was so hard. Once I read the book of Daniel, I read the second part of Daniel. Now I started to be like, is it possible that I can read the book of Revelation and understand it without anybody telling me, without any references except the Encyclopedia Britannica, because that's, I think, the oldest history record of what was going on at the time. And when I started to read now, I got so excited. It totally blew my mind. I started to wake up at 3 a.m. Now I was waking up because I had to. I couldn't wait to go to bed so that I could wake up in the morning. I'll tell you the things that I really enjoyed about being free from Adventism was coffee. I wake up in the morning and have coffee and sit down and read my Bible. And somebody gave me coffee as a gift, and I just drank it and I was like, oh, I've become hooked on that. But I say this to say the freedom and the joy that came. I was like, in another world. I cried like a baby when I went through the book of Corinthians, when I went through the book of Ephesians. Oh my gosh, Ephesians just took me to another place. We were predestined to be children of God. And now I started to take notes because I couldn't write fast enough. I started typing. I'm typing out, I'm reading, I'm crying, and it's just a mess. And at this time I hadn't gotten back to work because I was still kind of recovering and all of that stuff. And eventually I decided, you know what? I'm not going to sit around the house and wait to die. I said, actually, I'm going to work. I'm going to work. I'm going to live. I declare. And now came an anxiety in me to be like, I need to find the truth. My biggest thing just before I left Adventism, there was stacking up of questions. It became so many more that the church could not give me answers for. First, they couldn't answer for me what Jesus meant when he said that he has come to fulfill. What was he fulfilling? And when did he fulfill it? And why did he say it then when he wasn't planning on fulfilling it? And did his death fulfill anything? So that was one of the questions that they couldn't answer. Then I said, okay, look at this here, because to me, the Sermon on the Mount was his inauguration speech. Yes, he did preach, but this is the first one that is broadcast, and this is something we need to pay attention to. He's setting out the order of his kingdom. He's telling us he's coming to create this kingdom, and this is what his kingdom is here. It's here. When God wanted to come and live with us in the Old Testament, he said, let them build me a what? A sanctuary that I may dwell among them. But now the greater is even here. That sanctuary that he was talking about is Christ. He is here. He is our Sabbath. He is our rest. He is our everything. When I read the book of Hebrews and I said that they failed to enter into the rest, oh, it blew my mind. I couldn't believe this. I was like, wait a minute. It remains yet another rest for the children of God. What does that even mean? And now I'm not asking anybody for questions anymore because they can't answer. They couldn't even answer for me when I said, why are we not baptized in the Holy Spirit? Because it's clearly marked here. It says so in the Bible that they breathed on them, breathed and received the Spirit. And then one of our elders in the church, he's a pastor, and he baptized his son. And then he said to him, receive the Spirit. And I was like, okay, so he's going to be able to give his son the Spirit, and the rest of us, we're not going to get it. So I'm laughing now. It seems so funny, but when you're searching and when God has taken out the blinkers and when God has put you on a track and you are looking for the truth, you will go crazy looking for it. You will find it. You will search for it until you find it. And I had seen all the videos of Desmond Ford and all of them people. There was too much brain work for me. I couldn't even understand what they were talking about. And part of it was because I didn't care to pay too much attention. It kept being interviews that were dripping on and off. And I just couldn't, it didn't have any meaning to me, let me say. It wasn't important to me because I'm still sinning. I'm still dealing with gossip and envy and all of that. And you people are coming to tell me about this other investigative judgment. I'm not even there yet. But once I started to read the Bible for myself and read all the wonderful things that God has for us and just get filled with the gospel, whew, what a relief, what a freedom. Eventually I realized I cannot stay in this group of people. I did tell the people in the church that I was diagnosed with cancer, and that was the worst thing that I could have done. Everybody was like, oh, you should accept your fate. And I'm like, what? And if the Lord chooses to heal you, then I'm like, you see, right there, you people are starting to say that God is the God of death and that having cancer and sickness and death is honoring God. How? He didn't create me to die. He didn't create me to make me to just live this life of, how is that bringing God honor? And they were like, there's a problem with some of the people like you are, you get too proud because you've been in the church all along and you've been teaching the health message. And so now what are you going to do with the health message? And I said, I'm throwing away everything because it's not it's not there. Jesus doesn't teach the health message. Then I went back and I started to look with all my health message books and starting to read those verses that we've been using, and I see how out of context, completely out of context. There is not even one verse in the Bible that teaches the health message, not even one, and the church knows that. This is why they've been having a hard time trying to bring it together. But now that the whole world is getting on this vegan bandwagon and vegetarian and plant-based bandwagon, everybody's getting on it too. The church is like, oh, well, maybe people are coming to conformity. I don't believe that it is. It's another fad that's just like any other fad. And I think all our problems are stemming from the fact that we are not following what God says. And Jesus said it very, very clearly. 2 commandments. A new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another as I have loved you. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and your neighbor as yourself. Period. If we had done that, we would not have fought for tissue. If we had done that, we would not even have the COVID hit us as bad as it done. COVID has killed so many people because we're not following what God says. There's a lot of greed, there's a lot of politics, there's a lot of propaganda, and there's a lot of inciting hate and fear in people. Fear has killed more people. And God tells us over again, I have not given you that spirit of fear, but of power and love and of a sound mind. So that's how I left the Adventist church. I had to tell my pastor, I had to send him a message and, just say, I don't find myself in agreement with the fellowship anymore. I don't believe in these things. And out of respect for everybody, I left. Not that there was anybody who left, who kicked me out or I had a problem with the brethren. None of that at all. I didn't. In fact, the reason why I said I want to step away, I do not want to upset what's going on here. It's not my job to topple this congregation. That is not my job. My job is to let God do his thing. These people are there for a reason. And I don't want to do anything like that. So I just stepped away. I wrote them an email and the pastor did with it what he wanted. He told the people she's having chemo, she's crazy, she's confused. And none of that was true. I never had any chemo. That's another story for another time. But this is just how I came out of Adventism, and I couldn't tell some of my close friends who were already in the ministry because I was so disgusted, one, with a couple of things. First, I didn't want anybody to try and drag me back, so I didn't want to tell them. I knew that they were going to come and try and talk sense to me. The pastor came to my house several times, but he didn't find me here. I knew he was coming, so I just didn't go home. I went somewhere else. And I knew he was going to say some stuff behind me because that's just how he is. And I didn't take the bait. I didn't volley back and forth. And I knew that I had a lot of people that I was influential with in the church. And I didn't want to upset them or upset the church. And I think that's what he was worried about. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. If God is ready to take those people out of the church, nothing is going to stop you. Nothing is going to stop them. They're going to leave when they're good and ready. And there's no need for me to drag this in my name. So I just stopped going to the church. And anybody who wanted to know why I had left, they told them. But people wanted to make up stuff because people are afraid to just call somebody and say, I heard you're not going to church. What's going on? I would have gladly said, let's sit down. A couple of people came to me and did that, and we had a good fellowship. And they said, oh, I thought you left the Lord. I'm like, oh, no, I found the Lord. I found him. Or should I say, he found me. He saved me. I am no longer held by chains of formalism and religious doctrine. I am now free. I am a child of the Most High. And I don't have to worry about all the other things that others have. So it's been wonderful, amazing things that God has shown me. I couldn't be more free and more excited. Thank you for your listening to my testimony.